What are the top 10 decks for the post-February ban list? Alright, to the 30% of you that have not smashed the living crap out of that subscribe button, smash it so you guys don't miss out on more awesome content. And trust me, this was actually very hard because there's a lot of things on here I'm not too sure about. But we will have a top 5 rogue video after the top 10 here. So number 1 is going to be Plunder Patrol for the upper half of the category. Now, the only reason why I'm including this here is because this deck's ability to kind of take advantage of some certain attributes in the current format makes me definitely excited to see that there's a possibility here that we could see this deck actually kind of do something. And I'm generally excited for that. Now, against Plunder, or against your Kashtira matchup, it might not be the best optimized version to go for. Well, I mean, if you're trying to play Plunder Patrol on that and they lock all your back, obviously you can't do anything. But there's a rough, or a right amount of attributes right now that I think this deck can take advantage of. That definitely puts it on, you know, the possible good decks list, because you can play Kaijus, you can play Lava, you can play all sorts of like good cards to help you out and make sure that you can round out those relatively bad matchups. Next up is going to be Dragon Link. Now, this was kind of tough as well, because I truthfully don't know if this is a top 10er, because like this deck relies very heavily on the bysteals. If we're heading into a format where the bysteals aren't going to get you, you know, the craziest amount of value that you could actually hope for, then you kind of got to take a step back here and go, you know, can we do something? And, you know, bysteals being extenders is a good thing. I mean, Magna Hut is one of the best cards that you could want to see in an archetype like this. So I just want to point out that I'm unsure about this one, but in like the 9th slot, I don't particularly have an issue with putting this here. We'll have to wait and see how things shape up, but I think for now, it's going to depend on what happens around the rest of the format, if that genuinely makes sense. Next up is going to be Flanderies. Robbie, Barrier Statue is gone. Yeah, I know. But you know what? This deck is one of the most... It has everything that it has ever wanted to have, but without the Barrier Statue, you're just N-Pen Turbo. And I hate to tell you this, but N-Pen is a scary card. Alright, a lot of decks still have issues with this, and yeah, the deck is no longer like at the apex of its metagame potential, sure, but this deck can still do some very stupid combos. Alright, so if you're going into this format and you're like, well, you know, I don't think Flunder's gonna, you know, be a relevant deck, oh, think again. Alright, I have seen N-Pen do some really crazy things in the OCG of all places. Just keep in mind, I mean, obviously, you know, a full Kashtira board can probably run over some things here, but I mean, N-Pen doing N-Pen things definitely leads to some very interesting gameplay. Next up is going to be Sword Soul. Now, this kind of feels about right. I do think that Sword Soul is actually one of the decks right now in the format that can probably do something. Now, Sword Soul being able to make Ching-Ying, you know, draw power, some of these pretty big boards, certain decks in the room are actually going to kind of have an issue with this. And your Kashtira matchup isn't awful. That's like one big thing you kind of got to understand is like if you're playing into a Kashtira player, and you know you can set up and get yourself off the ground, you can do good. I mean, yeah, you can lose some like good draws and things like that based on your interactions, you know, if your opponent takes away your graveyard, sure, but I could definitely see this deck actually evolving in a way that actually allows it to kind of keep up with Kashtira. So I would not count Sword Soul out of the race yet. It's definitely one of those decks that, once again, I think can do something. It's just going to take some time for it to adjust. And then we have Runic. Now, I'm putting this at number 6 because it definitely doesn't deserve a rogue slot. Is it better than some of these other decks? Yes. What combination hybrids could we see out of this? I'm not sure yet. I was going to put Runic Sprite as a note here, which I'm going to. I mean, yeah, losing Elf was kind of stinky, but being able to very easily make Gigantic to turn it into a draw card is definitely something that, you know, Sprite Runic really kind of wanted to see. Plus, you know, you get all this normal advantages you would, minus, you know, Elf at the end of the rainbow. So I think that's kind of cool, worth noting, that like your Runic variations are going to probably do something this format. It's just we're going to have to be patient and kind of see where things go. I think this card is definitely kind of in the wild card slot and can shift around here in the top cut for sure. All right, next up is going to be Sprite. What, didn't you just mention Sprite? Well, we're going to mention Sprite Gishki and Sprite Evil Twins. Now, I'm not particularly sure about this, but I've read that a couple people have figured out Sprite Gishki. I don't know to what extent that necessarily means. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but if people are talking about, hey, you know, we can end on good end boards, you know, minus the elf, then you kind of got to put a little bit of stock in it and kind of, I guess, give them some consideration. I'm not really sure at the end of the day, but I guess from where I'm sitting, it's worth looking at. And then Sprite Twins, I mean, being able to do full Evil Twin combo, you know, for like the draw power and all the additional things that you kind of got too, that build kind of got off, you know, pretty free at the end of the day. So we'll have to wait and see. This is also kind of up in the air right now, but it's kind of like in the midsection, so I don't really have a problem with it. It can definitely shift around. Next up is going to be Tyr Albaz, or if you really want Fallen of Albaz, like good stuff. But that's basically what you're looking at here. The fact that, obviously, Robbie's acknowledging Fallen of Albaz, but most of the Fallen of Albaz variants usually ended up playing some sort of tier package in the deck because it's kind of free chicken nuggies for the fusion aspect of things. And that's basically kind of what you're looking at here at the end of the day. Is, I mean, you'll still be able to use your tier deck to get off the ground and do things. And that's what you want to see. Obviously, Branded Fusion doesn't punish you in any regard whatsoever. So you don't have to worry about that. That's fine. That's really what you want to see here when you're looking at the hybrid merges for these packages is, you know, how much can we play together with this? You know, how much is, you know, Tyr Albaz going to actually hurt? I think it's probably going to be one of the only real ways to save the tier package, in my personal opinion. So do with that what you will. Next up, we're going to put Labyrinth. Now, this feels a little bit high for me, for where I would really want to put this deck. But this deck is such a... We haven't got the chance to see its full potential yet, and players really haven't explored the options of seeing what this deck can do. So, given those two factors, I want to see what we can come up with here and what this deck will be able to do. Now, given back row heavy siding kind of shifts into the format, we can definitely see a shift back on this. But I think as we kind of go forward here, that this deck, I think, deserves a semi-high spot, purely because of the hype that it's got going for it. But we'll have to wait and see. This can very easily, once again, shift around. We'll have to wait and see. But very, very initial early thoughts tell me that we can see, you know, some pretty generic, interesting shifts here. Next up is going to be Minkonko. Now, I don't know if this is going to end up as the Libromancer build. I don't know if this is going to end up as like some tier shenanigans merged with it, but I can tell you right now, the TCG is very much looking at that Minkonko package right now, and it's getting cratered off the face of the market. Like, players are eating these cards up very, very heavily because they believe in this package. All right. Also, to be fair, it makes sense that this particular variation is gaining a lot of steam. We'll have to wait and see. I think that of everything on this list, this is the biggest wild factor right now. And we'll have to wait and see. I mean, obviously, you know, having a built-in change of heart into your archetype that's essentially searchable is always going to end up being a good thing, but we'll have to wait and see. I honestly wonder if the tier variation will end up being one of the better ones at the end of the day, but I don't know. I'll have to wait and see. And then, of course, we're going to put Kashtira here, but I'm also going to mention, like, the hybrid of tier with it. Which means that you could see a tier variation end up at the top cut, but Kashtira is going to be your main driving force for a lot of what we're expecting to kind of go forward here, strictly because Kashtira is the new toy. I mean, Kashtira does lose to Book of Eclipse, you know, your standard other shenanigans as well, you know, Lava Golem, Sphere modes. It's really going to depend on how they can end on their field, but it's definitely projected to be the best deck as of now. We'll have to wait and see. There is a possibility that we could see that shift around, but it's looking pretty diverse right now. I'll give it to them. So what do you guys think? Please leave a comment down below, tell me what you guys think. And don't worry, I will talk about Scareclaw, Rika, and some other Spriggans too. Don't worry, in another video. Patrons, thank you.
Thank you so much for watching. Check out these other videos.